always forget that Embracer owns Gearbox, which they bought for 1.3 billion. And they got all of this from Square for 300 mil.
Yeah. That is, I don't know. Like I said, that based on numbers alone, it just feels like Square was like, please, just take them. Just get them away from us.
I have the statement from Business Wire. The transaction will assist the company in adapting to the changes underway in the global business environment by establishing a more efficient allocation of resources, blah, 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 accelerating growth in the digital entertainment domain, enables the launch of new businesses by moving forward with investments in fields including blockchain, AI, and the cloud.
Absolutely not.
Square Enix has sold some of its key studios and properties to the Embracer Group. But just who are the Embracer Group, and what does this mean for Square games like Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, and Legacy of Kain?
Who are you shouting at?
You.
Oh, okay.
So joining me is Tamor Hussein.
Hi.
Key Legacy of Kain liker.
Number one Legacy of Kain fan. Take that skill up. And everyone else.
So $300 million US for
Not
Square.
a lot.
Not a lot of money for Square to sell off Eidos Montreal, Crystal Dynamics, Square Enix Montreal, as well as major IPs like Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, Legacy of Kain, and, quote, more than 50 back catalogue
I want to thank
games.
you for saying Legacy of Kain is a major IP still. I appreciate that. Everyone involved.
I feel like I wouldn't get out of this recording alive if
No.
I didn't. What do you make of the 300 million?
It feels very, very low, considering the other acquisitions that are happening now, and kind of the numbers that are attached to mobile developers and sales like that. It feels incredibly low, and I don't know how this has happened, but I guess it speaks to like due diligence would have been done. People would have been looking at the markets. People would have been looking at libraries and what's being sold, and this is what they came to.
Yeah.
It feels a bit almost like Square Enix were like, just take them, just have them. We don't care. Just get them out of here, which is a shame because a lot of amazing properties and a lot of amazing talent gone there.
Yeah.
To the Embracer Group, which is the kind of a current black void of like properties, companies, IPs, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It is massive. The Embracer Group has huge Scrooge McDuck energy, and we're still waiting for like some sort of clarity on what this means for those properties and those teams.
Well, rumors have been swirling for a long time about Square and potential acquisitions over there. I feel like it's a bit weird because some properties like Life is Strange, Outriders, and Just Cause are staying with Square Enix.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else, including Tomb Raider, which has kind of been, at least in the West, the most recognizable, might not have done so well sales-wise, as Square Enix Japan has frequently said, which is kind of awkward. So you can kind of see there is that rift between Square West and Square Japan. Like, Japan basically shits on the every time like a game comes out in the West, in Japan is just like, well, it didn't live up to expectations. Whereas I wonder if it's because they're judging against games like Final Fantasy XIV. That just make a ton of money.
I also they're judging against games like Final Fantasy XIV, and they're also judging against similar games in those genres from other studios, which isn't always the case. Like, I imagine they're looking at Uncharted and being like, why is Tomb Raider not selling like Uncharted?
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot behind why that is the case. And it extends to many, many things ranging from, pedigree of developer, marketing, and also like relevance now and first, that kind of stuff. But I don't know, there is a habit of like undervaluing and also like making these comparisons in ways that are skewing your perception of how they work and how they perform. It's such a shame to see. It is also baffling to see which ones they pick to keep and which ones they sent on their way. And it makes me feel like, they see potential in Outriders and Just Cause. I'm like, you don't see that potential in Tomb Raider. They also did say like the Square Enix collective stuff is what they want to keep their focus on alongside their own Japanese titles. So it could be that, you know, those games fall under that banner now, and they'll have a small group of Western appropriate games that are they're kind of like they're still betting on. And Just Cause does have a little more of the
Just Cause sells.
Yeah, it sells. It has wider appeal as well as an open world game, and also the team behind it has a lot of built-in history with making games that are increasingly relevant as a format. Everyone is trying to make open world games now, and a lot of them are like using complicated physics systems and that kind of stuff. And the team behind Avalanche behind Just Cause, it has been doing that for years. So at the very least, they're best positioned to put out another major open world title and it function well and it be well received and do pretty well, especially given that Just Cause has been away for a little while as well. I'm not sure what the bet on Outriders is. It did well. It did.
I feel like it was a flash in the pan though, because it went on Game Pass.
Yes, so Game Pass helped it a lot. But perhaps they see future potential in Outriders. It could be as simple as someone looking at a spreadsheet and going like, well, this did good once. We just need to invest deeper into it and it will be better. Whereas they see Tomb Raider going from a sharp incline into like a decline with the latest one, which was not as well received as the first two in the rebooted series. So who knows what the thinking is behind it. But it is a baffling set of kind of like decisions made.
You could say that about Square.
Yeah,
like
Square,
Western stuff for the past 10 years or so.
Yeah,
a baffling set of decisions.
Yeah, I feel like the IDOS part of Square, or when they merged and that kind of stuff was continuously mismanaged, I would say. And they had
it's like they didn't know what to do with it.
They had no idea what to do with it. And they had a few breakouts, like the Tomb Raider stuff was pretty great. And
releasing Thief, was it just after Dishonored,
yeah. And it kind of like got buried, and they made some decent bets as well that paid off. Like Guardians of the Galaxy is a good game. It's got one of the most annoying voiced characters in the history of video games with Rocket, but it's still a good game. Like the story was really good. There's a lot of creativity, and the writing's fantastic. But that was a good bet. Avengers, less so. I was gonna
say, are we talking about the Marvel elephant in the room here? Because Avengers is, even Guardians, which I really enjoyed, did not move the needle really dramatically. And Avengers has kind of become this game that like it comes up every so often because people are like, look at the Steam concurrence on Avengers. Like, that's the only time Avengers is coming up.
As someone who played a lot of Avengers,
you really did.
I played an alarming amount of Avengers. It for the longest time has felt like a game hanging on for dear life. And it still very much feels like that. And I feel like now this is a good kind of breaking point or like an opportunity for either the Embracer Group or Square Enix to be like, okay, we're done here. This is the end. And they've got a good reason to do that. I mean, they can be like, we had the acquisition, like we've had to reassess what we're doing. We think that the team is better off, working with, because Crystal Dynamics is co-developing Perfect Dark alongside the Initiative, which is something that is going to remain in as a partnership and in active development. They've got a good reason to be like, we got to pull away from this.
Crystal's now a 3-game studio.
Yeah.
Along with co-developing Perfect Dark, they're working on the new Tomb Raider. The announcement of which, in hindsight, is incredibly suspicious because it's kind of like the old Bethesda move of announcing Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 the year before an acquisition, kind of trying to juice that price up. Maybe that's speculation on my part, but announcing a new Tomb Raider game at the latest Unreal event. But they also do have an ongoing commitment to Avengers. Embracer said currently published games would move over after the deal, but future games would require working out a deal with the license holders. So as of right now, we don't know if we're going to get that extra Avengers content or if we're even going to get a sequel to Guardians.
We'll get whatever was agreed upon when they were part of Square Enix, which I don't know if they... I think Spider-Man is out now. I believe. I think the Wakanda expansion came out.
That's out.
Like,
Is She-Hulk the next one?
She-Hulk should be the next one, I believe. So if that deal was already inked, then great. I don't suspect we'll get any more beyond the current crop. If we want a sequel to Guardians of the Galaxy, that's going to have to be a new agreement between the Embracer Group and the Marvel as the rights holder. But it's just a weird state. But like I fully believe that the Avengers game is not long for this world.
Well, you mentioned the Embracer Group in ominous tones there. They are the kind of ones that whenever talk about acquisitions gets thrown around, people automatically go, oh, Sony's acquiring or Microsoft's acquiring or Tencent is acquiring.
Yeah.
Whereas Embracer has been hoovering up all these properties
in Europe.
And so now once this deal closes, it means that this will be, most of their development talent will be in the US, and number 2 country will be Canada. They'll have over 14,000 employees, 10,000 devs, 124 internal studios, more than 230 games in development, over 30 AAA titles. So I always forget that Embracer owns Gearbox, which they bought for 1.3 billion. And they got all of this from Square for 300 mil.
Yeah. That is, I don't know. Like I said, that based on numbers alone, it just feels like Square was like, please, just take them. Just get them away from us, which is unfortunate, as we said. But yeah, the Embracer Group, it's kind of like quietly becoming a bit of a behemoth, especially given that it was born from the ashes of THQ, which is kind of interesting because we all saw how that there's that meme of the person like hitting the small domino and at the end is the big one. And I saw one which was like the very small one was like THQ bets too big on you draw tablets, and at the end of it was like like Embracer Group owns Square Enix's biggest properties, and it's just like, holy crap, you're right. But yeah, it's one of those weird, like I said, describe it as a black hole where a lot of companies, a lot of developers, a lot of IPs go into it, and then they're never seen again for a really long time. Like, but
then they have Koch Media, they have those, they have showcases where they show off, but they don't have like a kind of one big showcase for everything. They're still kind of diversifying a little bit. They have Asmodee as well. They have Dark Horse Media, so they bought comics.
Finally,
someone's
we can get
rescued.
some good comics based on our video game properties.
But yeah, and they have Vertigo Games. You know, they have a lot of stuff there. It just feels like this is this weird kind of incubation period before they kind of come out.
I mean, like the interesting thing about Embracer is that it's kind of unnerving to see a lot of these big companies or big properties that we love go into, like I said, this void of like collection, someone's private collection of IPs. But it's also, if you think about it from a glass half full approach, it's actually quite exciting because Square Enix had properties like Deus Ex, they had Tomb Raider, they had Legacy of Kain, and they were doing nothing with it. And they showed no intention to do anything with it. Yeah. And they also don't have the capability to do anything with it. Given the kind of resources they had, the teams they had, it wasn't likely that they were going to put an internal studio on a new Legacy of Kain game, right? Because Crystal Dynamics is busy with other things. They're making Avengers, they're making another Tomb Raider game. The likelihood of them making a new Legacy of Kain game is not super high. And also we've seen that they're not super good at courting talent from outside its own internal studios. People Can Fly with Outriders is one of the few exceptions. I can't think of that many that have happened beyond them and have had some kind of level of notoriety.
I mean, I would say Deck 9, but I feel like Deck 9, you know, they rose to notoriety with Life is Strange.
And then Square Enix came along.
Well, no, Don't Nod and Square brought Life is Strange, but then you know they gave the IP, or like they purchased it and they've given it to Deck 9. So Deck 9 has that kind of like.
Sorry, what I meant is like the property itself came along, and that was what they bet in. Like they knew that they had something good with Life is Strange, and they were like, we can take this to a developer. Whereas the idea of resurrecting a property like the Legacy of Kain and going out there and being like, who wants to make a Legacy of Kain game? It's not happening. Whereas with the Embracer Group, you have this, either you have a crap ton of internal developers that are like, hey, we've got this IP now as part of our family. Can we make a game based on it? Or they're in a position where they're like, we just bought a bunch of properties. Now let's put these properties to work. And they're like, if anyone has pitches for Legacy of Kain, come to us. That's way more likely because they have, like I said, there are this behemoth that has more resources than Square Enix had. Yeah. And they have an actual reason to invest in new properties to make good on their money spent on it, which is not a lot. Whereas Square Enix is like, we're not going to spend money we can put on Final Fantasy on trying to bring back this vampire game that Tamor and Skill Up love. It's like, whatever.
Well, I mean, let's talk about Square. So obviously we mentioned earlier, like, rumors have been flying for a while about Square. And like I said, the Japanese side of the business has kind of always said that the Western side has been underperforming. And so now I have the statement from Business Wire. The transaction will assist the company in adapting to the changes underway in the global business environment by establishing a more efficient allocation of resources, blah, 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 accelerating growth in the digital entertainment domain, enables the launch of new businesses by moving forward with investments in fields including blockchain, AI, and the cloud.
Absolutely not.
AI and the cloud.
AI and cloud's great. Blockchain, I mean, like, who knows whether the intention behind this is, you know, is real. Like right now, I feel like if anyone sells anything, the way you stop people from panicking after you've sold it is like, just mention the word blockchain. And like investors and anyone who's like got money in a company will be like, oh, okay, this is a thing that's appropriate and is like current. So who knows whether they actually want to get into blockchain. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but I would be just as there would be a lack of surprise also if they were like, no, we just said that so that our share prices don't tank or whatever it is.
I mean, if that bubble's gonna burst.
But
I mean, it's not like Square Japan is clamoring around for titles. You know, they've announced Kingdom Hearts 4
on the blockchain. Let's go.
Yeah, Sora shoes are in the blockchain. That's why he's got small feet now. You know, they've got 7 Remake Part 2, although we haven't heard about that in a long time. But we have heard about Final Fantasy 16, which is apparently nearing completion of development, or is closer to the end than people think it is. So I don't know. It's such a weird one.
Yeah, Square Enix. I think if this manifests in anywhere, it's going to be, they've got quite a robust mobile business, which is...
Oh, yeah. Isn't there a 7 Battle Royale?
Yeah, there's a Soldier Battle Royale game, and there's a Final Fantasy 7 Battle Royale game, and there's a bunch of...
all the pixel remasters.
They've got pixel remasters, but also outside of, you know, the Western world, in Japan, I believe they've got a few titles that perform pretty well. I mean, like, yeah, they have that mobile division... or that mobile understanding where you could conceivably see them working in blockchain and cloud and AI stuff, which is like, okay, that's fine. It feels like they overall, for me, like it feels like this is a thing which they said to kind of stop panic and stop people from being like, oh, they're just selling off everything. It definitely will.
It's a fire sale.
Yeah, fire selling it. I feel like the intent behind them is we know what is making us money. Yeah. And we need to focus on that. And those things are our internal Japan studios, which is basically Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest. Let's focus in on that. The mobile titles attached to it. Forspoken, I guess, still exists, which is technically I don't know what kind of collaboration that gets kind of like put under, but it's a little bit of West, a little bit of East. But they have that, and then I think that their whole thing was like tightening up the bootstraps and like focusing on that so they can start to reap the benefits of that without having losses and like expenditure on things that aren't actively making them money. So, and then the kind of like blockchain AI stuff is something they'll look into, probably to some degree, but also serves as a good way to stop people from getting nervous if they have, investments tied up in Square Enix, and stop also like from partners from from being like, what are you guys doing?
It's the buzzword, isn't it?
Yeah.
God help them though if they tie any blockchain stuff to your Square Enix account.
That Square Enix account is basically like the most impenetrable thing ever. Like, if you want to ever secure some data, hide it in a Square Enix account because you will not be able to log into it the next time you try. That's how it works. The amount of times I've had to make a new account for Final Fantasy, and it's just been like, enter your one-time password, and I'm like, okay, what is it? Don't know. Good luck figuring it
out. Well then, big news. Let's end on, do you think Square Enix Japan is up for sale now?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's been some rumors about Square Enix Japan coming along and that going up for sale. The thing about these companies is they're always up for sale. And there are always people interested in it. Yeah. It is like, it's not a moment where someone suddenly goes, hey, you know what would be cool? Why don't we buy Square Enix?
You know what's better than one development studio company?
Yeah.
A billion.
Companies like, obviously Sony is the name that most people are throwing around as the most likely to be interested in it. The way this works is Sony is always interested in it. Yeah. And Sony has people PlayStation has people on their team that are actively and always assessing what acquisitions they can make. And if they look at Square Enix and like, not now, they'll come back within a few months' time to look at it again. So right now, whether the intention is there or not, or whether it's going to happen, there are probably PlayStation people looking at Square Enix and being like, can we do this? Should we do this? And they are likely making some offers as well, in all likelihood, because that's the way the world works. Like, someone's always trying to buy you out. I wouldn't be surprised if Sony came along and were like, we're buying you. And they could make a good case for it as well, because one, they've got a long lineage with PlayStation, and also they can just roll up and be like, hey, we have an inbuilt audience for Final Fantasy. We always have. We made Final Fantasy as big as it was based on our platforms, and it makes sense for us to combine, etc., etc. And then also Sony, as they mentioned previously, is looking to get into more like long-term revenue streams and have like games as a service titles, and Final Fantasy Ziv is like one of the biggest right now. Yep. So it makes perfect sense for them to roll up with a big dump truck of money and just be like, you belong to us now. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I don't think it's going to happen immediately. Like, we're not going to hear about it for a little bit, I suspect.
I think the dust is going to settle. Yes. I think when this deal with Embracer goes through, which is meant to be through July through September, they're hoping to finalize, then maybe someone will make that.
Yeah, Sony will need to take a little bit of time to kind of let the dust settle, see what the worth is, and then do it. In the same way that Microsoft did with Activision. There was a reason why that played out the way it did, because they were like, now your stock is not doing great, so we can buy you for cheaper. So there will be people being like, let's wait, see what happens after this Embracer stuff, give it a few months, I don't know, a few weeks, whatever it may be, and be like, now's a good time to do it, or let's wait, let's see what happens. And then that happens. You know what? Fair play to them. It would make sense. I don't want one company to own everything, but also I would like to see companies thrive. And if Sony comes along and they're like, hey, we can make Final Fantasy even better. Okay, cool. Like, that's great. And for me, like, number one hope now is that like Embracer is talking to people about bringing back franchises like Deus Ex, especially Legacy of Kain. I have been ongoing. I was
gonna say
my advocacy for Legacy of Kain's return has been many years in the making. So I'm hoping that someone rolls up and is like, let us make that.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see and find out. Hey.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. It's so weird that I'm having to look past you. I'm sorry, Tam, but thanks for watching. We'll have all the latest as and when it comes through. Keep your eyes peeled at GameSpot. New studio. Hey. Podcast studio.